So now let's start talking about how do we transform a behavior from a chore into a gift. And I just want to suggest to you that this is not rocket science. Gifts are better than chores, period, right? So to give you an example using the why, how, do model that we just went over, I want to give you a specific example. So this person's reason is a chore. I'll talk about Jan, who is a client of mine. And when she started working with me, she came to me and she said, you know, Michelle, every time, she had been an athlete growing up. So as a kid, she had been super athletic, you know, something I don't relate to at all. People assume that I'm athletic. I am not. But she was so athletic, and then when she got older and she had kids, she put on weight. And so her approach as an adult to try to exercise more was always focused on trying to lose weight. And she said, you know, she'd go to the gym and tell the staff there, kick my butt, because I want to get these pounds off, right? A type of a punishment. Make me work hard. I can't work hard on my own because I don't want to do it. So I need you to make me to work hard. And of course, what do you think happened? She quit. Till the next time, she went back and got a personal trainer and she said, kick my butt. Then what do you think happened? She hurt herself. You know, she stopped, went to physical therapy for a couple months, and then, but darn it, her focus just kept being on weight loss. And finally, she got exhausted of the vicious cycle of failure. But this is what happened, is that her reason did not get her to prioritize the behavior in her life, and so she didn't do it. That's how it works. So in contrast, let me tell you about what happened when she changed. So when she went through my program, which again, you're going through the process right now, you're learning how to use these methods with your patients, she answered the same questions that you've answered, and we talked about things, and then she decided that she was going to stop trying to lose weight. She was going to stop trying to really do it hard so she could burn those calories and lose weight. And she was going to give herself a break and try and move her body in a way that felt good to her, that gave her pleasure, and that she could fit into her life. She didn't have to run to the gym and change her clothes. You know, who's got time for an additional 45 minutes shower plus clothes change multiple times a week? So she changed the way she did it, and the purpose was about just taking care of herself. She made that her purpose. And what happened is, it started to feel like a gift. And she started to feel motivated to do it. And she noticed when she took walks outside, this was in the summer, she was appreciating the flowers, and she felt friendly and talked to her neighbors, and it turned it into this whole experience, and she made that a priority. She kept doing it. So those are that's contrasting how people typically do it, but how they can change. And I've already heard people in here say that they want to know how they can do it differently, that they struggle with these issues, and it's not just about their client. And that's, again, what we're in the process of converting, transforming, rebranding self-care and exercise from a chore to a gift. And it starts with the why. But here's the situation. Humans have a present focus bias. And that means that we are more motivated by immediate, smaller rewards than we are by rewards that happen, that bigger rewards, more profound rewards that happen in the future. So can someone tell me, can a few people tell me, how having a present focus bias is related to what we're talking about right now? It takes a long time to lose a lot of weight. What if someone is even able to do that? So you're saying people won't be as motivated because it takes a long time. Yep, why else?
You can exercise for a week and really not necessarily feel the benefits.
So the reality is that if human nature is about instant gratification, which is another way to think about this. How is our health promotion ever going to work if we're talking about the future, weight loss in a month, disease prevention in 20 years? We're going against human nature. So a really brilliant behavioral economist named Dan Ariely talks about his experience with this issue. He, at this point, he lived in Israel. He's a really, really famous guy right now in the United States, and he's got great free videos online. And in one of his videos, he shares a story about reward substitution. And reward substitution basically reflects the idea that you take a reward that's in the future and you substitute the reward for the same behavior for something that's in the present. And his own example that he shares is really profound. So he went to the hospital and he got a bad blood transfusion and got very sick. And his doctor wanted to put him on an experimental drug at the time called interferon. And he was open to it. He said he'd do it. But then he discovered that the drug made him violently ill, and it made him vomit, and the whole day was gone. And he wasn't taking the drug, even though it was going to save his liver eventually in 20 years. He couldn't do it. It made him feel so sick, but he was, he's a smart guy, and he decided that, okay, in order to motivate me to take this horrible drug, the only way I'm going to do it is if I let myself do something really fun the day I'm going to be feeling so bad. So he basically created a new system for himself. He said, forget about 20 years. Every time I have to give myself the shot, I'm going to let myself watch my favorite movies. And then after a year of being on the protocol, he went back to his clinician, and his doctor said, I have never had such a compliant patient as you. What was your secret? And this notion of reward substitution is what I'm suggesting to you. That we need to stop directing our patients to focus on these distant outcomes, even if we care about them, because instead we need to work with human nature and get them to start to notice the immediate impact of their choices and their behavior. I'd like to open for some questions. Does that make sense to people? Are there people concerned about that? Is there any pushback? Like, I can't do that. I work in a hospital. Yeah.
But isn't the idea of going on a diet or motivating or exercising, in a sense, we view it as something we're depriving ourselves of? I mean, we deprive ourselves of our favorite foods, or we deprive ourselves of our time doing what we'd rather do to exercise. So how do you turn that into a reward?
Well, let's hear what other people think based on what you've learned today.
Because after you exercise, you feel better and you have the energy to do more, and you can still fit in that.
So the idea was, well, if we're teaching people to exercise for weight loss and outcomes, and it feels like something we should do, how do we change that around? And this person said, well, we change the reason that we're telling people to do it. It's really, we ask them to start noticing how they feel when they move. And part of the solution lies in the fact that we have to stop prescribing how people move. The old exercise recommendations said that we had to get our heart rates up and we had to do it for these periods of time. That is passé. And someone would say to me, and even if it weren't passé physiologically, meaning we have more knowledge and there's new justification for prescribing in different ways. But let's just say let's just pretend that the best health benefits, or the ones that people care most about, are only going to come from exercising at 80% of your max heart rate for 40 to 60 minutes, 5 days a week. If people aren't going to do it, that prescription is worthless. I don't care if it reflects positive physiological outcomes. People aren't going to do it. And I would say we know people don't do it because most people haven't adopted physically active lifestyles over the last 30 years. But it turns out that we have new ways to measure the benefits of physical activity with objective electronic devices called accelerometers. And we now know that everything you do matters, even little bits. And the most important thing is to go from doing nothing to something. And I really think that needs to be the new message. So it's not only about the gift. A behavior is a gift for two reasons. The purpose is meaningful and relevant and compelling to your daily life, i.e., you have more energy, you enjoy being a parent more, you're more creative at work, but the experience of the behavior also needs to align with who you are. And all the magazines prescribe this certain way of exercising, and most people have got to figure out how they want to move themselves. At the end of the session last night, a woman came up to me and said, but I don't know what experiences I want to get from being active. And the only way, and that's probably true for many, many people, and the way you do it, which I'm kind of jumping ahead of the solution, is you have to experiment. Because if you don't know, you have to try things and see how they make you feel, but you have to throw out gold standards of this being the right way to exercise. So what I want to do is, I'm suggesting that we should move away from promoting distant biomarkers, but then my mom comes into the picture, because that's my mom that was taken a couple weeks ago at my 5-year-old son's birthday party, and my mom said to me, who's a worried well, she said, but Michele, I do want to prevent cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes. That's what motivates me. And it does. But I said to my mom, I turned to her and I looked at her and I said, but Mom, you didn't start exercising until you were tired. And you had the whole day to fit in a 30-minute session. So what we have to understand is that it's very easy to say that we value being healthy. How many people care about their health? Almost everyone. I think that would probably be true for anyone around the world. But here's the problem. So we asked people why they valued being physically active. And there were 4 groups: weight and appearance, their current health situation, their healthy aging, to do it for healthy aging, and their daily quality of life. And we asked them, how much do you value these reasons compared to what you most care about in your life? And as you can see, the people who exercise for quality of life, healthy aging, and current health equally valued these things, which makes sense, right? Now, those who were exercising for weight and appearance didn't. But we followed them over a year, and here's what we found. The people who exercised for quality of life did 20% more exercise than those who exercised for current health and healthy aging, and about 34% more than those who exercised for weight and appearance. And so what's important to understand is that we've been socialized to care about our health. So we will all say, yes, I want to exercise to be healthy. But on a daily basis, and what drives our decision-making every day, feeling good is a really compelling, makes it compelling. It makes it more compelling to make a priority. So remember, it's not about motivation. It's about whether you feel like approaching something or avoiding it, and whether you are going to approach it and make it a priority, or whether you're going to avoid it and not make it a priority. And that's kind of how things work. So this shows us that there's a gap between what we say we value and what we actually do, our behavior. But in fact, I want to suggest to you that this gap is really between the logic part of our brains and the emotional parts of our brains, and what actually guides our decisions every day. Another way to think about this is that we need to reframe things from logical ways into emotional ways, and I think we can do that by teaching people to, by instead of counseling our patients in health-based whys and for health-based whys, we start asking them to make changes and do things because it will influence how they feel. Now, I'd love to hear someone argue with me. I'd love to hear about a problem that you see with this, with what I'm suggesting. Not because I want to get an argument. I want to hear what's in your mind and what you're thinking about this. Yes? Violating protocols and teaching. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Very general, but if one is involved in a health teaching program, there's certain things that they're supposed to teach.
And who determines the curriculum for what they're teaching? So, are you talking about teaching health professionals or teaching patients?
I'm talking about health professionals teaching patients, and there's usually some predetermined lesson plan.
A predetermined lesson plan. So that's a great point. So if you've been told to use a certain protocol, and I'm suggesting, now tell me, does that protocol work? I mean, you've all been taught protocols. Do the protocols along the Spock-based approach, does it work in general? Or, I mean, I know that's a general statement, but what do you think? Does it work for some people but not others? I mean, how good does it work? How you're working with your clients and patients, how effective are you in promoting sustainable behavior?
I think that for the most part, it's going to work for some, because you do have some people who are more logic. I mean, you take my family, my daughter and I are very emotional. You get us on a logical level, and poof, we just totally zoned out. But my son and my husband are very logical. And if you mention emotional or well-being, they just zoned out.
Got it. So it's really important to help identify who is going to benefit from a logic-based approach and who's going to benefit from taking a more experiential well-being approach. And that's a really valid point, because there are individual differences and people are different. And what I want to do is use a quote from Jane Brody. Jane Brody is a woman in her 70s who's a New York Times fitness and wellness columnist, and she interviewed me in August. And I read her article afterwards, and I pulled a piece out where she reflected on her reasons, and I think it does a really great job of exemplifying what I'm talking about. And she said, I walk 3 miles daily or bike 10 miles. Now remember, she's a fitness writer, okay? So she's a fitness enthusiast. She bikes 10 miles, swims 3/4 of a mile. If you ask me why, weight control may be my first answer, followed by a desire to live long and well. But that's not what gets me out of bed before dawn. So what do you think? Why does she get up if not for health and weight? For herself. Can you be more specific? How she feels in general. It's how these activities make me feel. More energized, less stressed, more productive, more engaged, and yes, happier. Better able to smell the roses and cope with the inevitable frustrations of daily life. And while there are differences between people, some people being more logical and some people being more experiential, I want to suggest to you that everyone wants gifts. No matter who you are, you want gifts. So even the people who are focused on logic want gifts. And the trick is to figure out how can you help them using the system that's going to be most influential to them to move in that direction. And detail the method. And you've already done some of the method yourself, and these conversations are part of the method, but now I want to explicitly go through how I do the Reframing Health as Well-Being method. And I just want to get onto your pages in your handout. So the first thing, and again, I want to stay focused on physical activity because I think for the teaching it's important to be consistent about the process through it. But I want to remind you that when you do this, and you can modify these questions and techniques for any behavior, but again, to think about which behavior you're talking about. I've already spoken to 2 people today, one of whom is interested in helping people change kind of environmentally sustainable behaviors, and she's seeing how this can be used for that, and someone else who deals with education. And I do believe this model that I'm going to teach you can be applied for any type of behavior. It may need some tweaking, but it's flexible enough, but it's comprehensive enough that the issues of motivation, emotion, cognition, priorities, and just skills apply throughout. So, maps. What do maps do? They direct us, right? They direct us to our destination. They're a core part of our life. We usually buy maps that someone else has written and figured out how to take us from point A to where we're trying to go. So I'm going to give you maps to sustainable self-care. But they're different because instead of me filling out the maps and telling you how to get from point A to point B to point C, I'm just going to give you signs along the way that say, oh, you've got to figure out how to do this here and then this here, because people have to determine their own maps to sustainable self-care because it is a lifelong process that never ends. And so if you as a clinician tell patients how they're going to do it and their life is different than yours, it's probably only going to last a short while, as you probably know. So let me tell you what MAP stands for. It stands for the meaning of the behavior, and more broadly, does the behavior feel like a chore or a gift to the person? It reflects awareness and becoming aware of the specific beliefs and expectations we have about the behavior, how to do it, why to do it, what it's going to do for us, as well as becoming aware of the real challenges that prevent us from doing our planned behavior. And here's that special word, permission. The P is permission, and it's about helping giving yourself permission, giving your patients permission to take time to prioritize their self-care. And again, let's think about what's self-care. We're not talking about numbers on a scale. We're talking about how people feel and live on a daily basis. And I can guarantee you there's a strong correlation between the two. But we're smarter if we're starting off with the feeling and the meaning, because that's what drives motivation and behavior. And the question that you asked back there about you have a specific protocol that you're supposed to teach, that is a really relevant concern about what I'm teaching you. But I would suggest that a way to go about it is the people who develop protocols should be collecting data on how well they're working, if not just anecdotally. And if there's another way that you want to try it in your practice, present this idea and start collecting data and see as an experiment and see if one way leads to better outcomes, even in just a sample of a few people to give you a sense. The S is strategy. It's the logistical part of MAPS. Most of MAPS is about how people believe and think and feel, and the last part is about logistics, pure logistics and skills. So the path to sustainability is going to differ for each person, so each person has to develop their own maps. Does that make sense? So let's start with meaning. Determine if the patient's meaning of the desired behavior feels like a chore or a gift. This is what we did before. That's how I start the conversation. And this is a wonderful entry point for people who are ambivalent. Because people, you talk to a patient about, you should be exercising more, yeah. You know, someone who you've been telling that to for, however many visits, or your clinician says that to you, that's not the way you change behavior. You need to spark some curiosity, and you need to find a way in. And I want to suggest to you that this is a great way into the conversation. Don't ask if they're exercising. Ask them, does exercise feel like a chore or a gift? And this is all on your handout so that you'll be able to have access to this. Another key question I found is, what have you learned to believe about this behavior growing up as a child in school and the media? So I just want you to take a minute, and I want you to write down what you learned growing up in your household about physical activity and exercise. Okay? So just take 1 minute to do that. Even if it's nothing. So this is a really helpful question. I had a client once say to me, you know, what I realized after I filled out this question, Michele, she said, you know, I was a military kid and we moved all over. And wherever we went, when we were bad, my dad would make us go to the track and run laps. And she said, and I didn't realize until that moment why I've always thought exercise was punishment. And that realization opened the door for a whole new relationship. So going back to childhood and thinking about whether you felt embarrassed or you weren't good, you know, those are helpful things because it creates, remember, awareness, the meaning of behavior and awareness. So the other thing is to use the notion of the vicious cycle of failure and the wrong why to help explain to your patients why what they've been doing hasn't worked. So I can guarantee you that almost everyone, and many of you that might feel this way too here, who aren't regular exercisers and have tried many times, feel like failures. They feel like they're at fault. There's something wrong with them, with us, that we haven't been successful doing it. And that is not helpful for developing a sustainable path for self-care. And what is helpful is to give people concepts and images and ask them, do you relate to this? Is that what happens to you? And get them to understand what that does. And I mean, a lot of people resonate with this. And what this does is it lets people externalize failure. So instead of it being like, I just don't know how to do this. I must be a failure. I must not be athletic enough or whatever it is. It's like, wait a sec. Someone gave me a map that set me up to fail. And that's exactly what's happened. And it's no fault of the researchers and the medical doctors who've been giving these recommendations. They're only doing what they know. The problem is, and this is short-sighted, is that the people who are out there writing the recommendations for physical activity and dietary change and all of that are not experts in marketing and motivation. And so what they should be doing is come up with their best science and then give us a call and say, okay, this is what we really want people to do. What do you think is the best way to communicate about it? Because this is about consumer behavior. It's not about medicine. And the people who are telling us what to do are clinicians. And they don't know, and not just clinicians, they're medical-based, many of you are medical-based people. This is a question of consumer behavior and marketing. Repeat customers. So use the vicious cycle of failure as an awareness-raising tool to help people externalize past failures, because they're not failures. They just didn't get it because the path didn't lead there. And it's important for patients to understand that the formula for behavior change that society has given us has set most up to fail. Does anyone have any questions about this? Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go on to the second part, awareness. Help the patient become aware of whether their primary reason for adopting behavior in general tends to benefit or undermine them staying motivated, them getting positive experiences from the behavior, and sticking with the behavior. So remember, we're in the awareness section. So part of the process to convert a behavior from a chore into a gift is you have to help people understand where they are right now as you're talking to them, where if they're in a place where they're staying motivated and getting positive experience, they have to recognize those things. If you skip over getting people to become aware in their own minds about these things, you're going to skip an important step. So let's take a minute and just brainstorm, and we can focus on physical activity. What are the actual recommendations and rules we've been taught to teach our patients, or that we've been taught about what is valid exercise? So let's get very specific. 30 minutes a day. Okay. 30 minutes per day, 3 times per week. What else?
Increase heart rate.
Heart rate. What else?
Strength training.
So you're supposed to do strength training. 10 minutes 3 times per day. Moderate to vigorous, okay. Oh, don't forget that flexibility stuff, yeah. So, we could do this for any self-care behavior. We could have a whole different conversation about diet, right, and dietary change. So then, the question is, you ask people, or you ask yourself, do your beliefs and expectations about physical activity and fitness lead you to have sustained motivation? So those things that we just wrote down, do those lead people to have sustained motivation? The rules. And most people would say, some people would say yes, but I found most people would say no. And then you ask, in general, do your beliefs and expectations set you up? Do those rules that you've learned and believed set you up to enjoy being physically active? This is really this is a step in the process. We get people to acknowledge that what they've learned, and in the process we're going to help teach them that this is not truth. This is not absolute truth. This is one scientific recommendation and another scientific recommendation. And the reality is, if they are not working to get people to actually stick with it, then they're worthless. So now, if you could take a minute, and I want you to write on this piece of paper for yourself how your beliefs and expectations for you, how your beliefs and expectations about exercise and physical activity are either helping or harming you from staying motivated to prioritize it. So now I need a volunteer, a brave volunteer, to come up here with me for a couple minutes, and I want someone who really feels like exercise is a chore. So I'm going to go through a process that about these issues with someone so I can model for you. So, okay, come on up. Thank you. Here's for you. And what's your name?
I'm Mary.
Okay, Mary, thank you for coming up. So now I'm going to show you what I have people fill out questions, and then I would ask them questions about what they filled out. So in general, would you say that actually, let me turn the slide. The beliefs and expectations that you've written about and that you have for physical activity and exercise come from what you've learned in our culture. In general, would you say what you've learned to believe and expect from exercise leads you to feel motivated to stick with doing it?
I never stick with it, so it must not be motivating me at all.
Okay. Okay, well that's why this is, does it lead you to feel motivated? First question. So we're not asking about the exercise, we're asking about the beliefs. We're asking about these things. Does the meaning of exercise that it has in your life and the things you've been taught to believe are fact and necessary for exercise, does it lead you to stay motivated? And if the answer is no, then we know that if the answer is yes, then you're doing it and you wouldn't be standing up here most likely. So then the next question is, can you give me one belief or expectation that you have about exercising that's in your head?
That you really have to take a set time every day to do it.
Okay, and do you think that belief helps or hinders you from staying motivated?
It hinders me because I just don't find the time. My day is so packed anyway.
Okay, and what's another belief or expectation that you have about exercise?
That it has to be a real effort. You know, you have to get out of breath at some point. You have to have this warm up. You work hard, you cool down.
And does that belief help or hinder you from staying motivated?
Well, it hinders me again because of the time involved and the process involved in planning out what you're going to do or getting the equipment to do it.
And are you drawn to move in those ways, those effortful ways?
In my mind, I know that this is something I really should be doing because it probably will help me feel better, but it must not be drawing me because I don't do it.
But when do you have, you know how we did that exercise where you did an approach, a plus or a negative? When you, in the moment that you think about working really hard in exercise, do you feel a plus or a negative in your gut?
A negative.
Okay, so you're not really drawn to doing that type of exercise anyway?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. So I would do this with people, get them to write down first their beliefs and expectations, and then with them go over whether it helps or hinders. And again, the person has to decide. We are not in a position to know whether a belief helps or hinders. For some people, working out hard and taking 60 minutes of their day would help them. But again, people have to figure that out. So then the next question is, and I'll ask you, in general, do your beliefs and expectations about physical activity lead you to have sustained motivation?
No.
In general, do your beliefs and expectations set you up to enjoy being physically active?
No.
And then can you tell me how your beliefs and expectations help or hinder you from sustaining physical activity?
Well, they hinder me because I have it in my mind that it's going to take more time than I have, so I don't take the time. I have it in my mind that that time is something I could better spend on something for my family. And if I just say, okay, I'm just going to do this for me, I feel kind of selfish, guilty. And so I just don't do it.
Okay, so let's give Mary a round of applause. Thank you. At first, you want to help people. I mean, you have to probe. What do you think counts as exercising? People might say, I don't know. And then you might have to probe further and say, do you think you have to sweat for it to count? Do you think you have to do it for like 30 minutes or just 5 minutes okay? So you need to probe probably for people who wouldn't be able to answer that question. Putting the person in the context of their family, absolutely. And you know, we cannot treat, as I'm sure most of you don't do, treat people as if they're in a vacuum and don't have nagging spouses or spouses who are really helping them do it in a helpful way. You know, other people always make things complicated, but helping them identify what are the beliefs and expectations of your wife or husband about this, because that is part of it. And you know, truthfully, if the spouse, you know, a stereotypical thing that's coming to my mind is a husband telling his wife he's got to keep losing weight. I mean, you know, the wife has got to figure out a way to communicate to her partner that isn't helping her, and in fact, it's actually making her want to rebel. There goes that back to that rebellious stuff that happens. So this is an educational process. This is a re-education of how to think and talk about self-care with people. And as you astutely raised, it also has to do with family members. And that's not a simple matter either. So going back to where we were, so we need to help the patient or the person become aware in the ways in which their beliefs and expectations or their partners undermine and or foster their motivation for doing this behavior and sticking with it over time. And again, the conversation is not about starting. We need to start using language like sticking with, sustaining it, staying motivated. That's the goal. And I don't think you guys have been trained to talk like that. And the only reason I'm talking like that is because that was my goal back with the cancer survivors. It was, wow, these women didn't sustain physically active lives, even though it was great for them. So sustainability has been my word, for almost 20 years. But start using those words because it changes the paradigm. When people start to think about sticking with things, they're like, there's no way I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and exercise for 40 minutes. If I'm talking about staying with this, what can I do to start? Well, maybe I can commit to doing 5 minutes of walking on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Because that's what I can do, and that's what I can learn on. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So here, people often write in my program that exercise has to be painful and count for it to count. That they have to do it for 40 minutes. And that it's going to, if they do it right, then they're going to get skinny and look good, right? That's the ultimate fallacy that people are taught about exercising. And that, you ask people, it has to be painful. Does that help or hinder? The person's very clear. That hinders me. It will make me thin. Does that help or hinder you from staying motivated? It hinders. And so now that we're aware, so now that people are aware, remember, awareness is the second part of MAPS, then we can do something. People can't make changes if they're not aware of what they believe, because our beliefs determine our mindset, and our mindset determines our behavior. So we have to go to the core, which is the beliefs. So now that we're aware, we are in a position to do something different. And I would suggest to you that, I've been in the health education field a long time, and I feel that if we do not go to the core of people's beliefs about their reasons and how they do it, we are putting new messages on top of very powerful old tapes in people's brains, and that's why the behavior falls away. So what we need to do is excavate. We need to get in there. That's a word and a tool I've really learned to love from my 5-year-old son, because he loves excavators, and now I do too, because it gives me a concept about what we're talking about doing. So now we're going to move into the third part of permission as it relates to physical activity. Permission, again, would relate to any behavior, and there's a whole separate kind of module about how do you give yourself permission to just take care of yourself in general. But now we're applying it to just physical activity. So we need to give the patient permission to exorcise the beliefs and expectations that undermine their motivation and behavioral sustainability. People need permission to let go of these things, because in their minds they feel like truth. But again, if they're not effectively motivating behavior, they are not right. And this will put you in conflict if there are protocols that you're supposed to be doing. This notion may put you in conflict with what you've been taught to do. But again, I suggest you go and you talk to the people who said this is how you have to do things, and you ask if they're effective, or how do they know they're effective. I have found this method to be systematic and powerful and work in the same way every time. So here's what I want you to do. There's some stuff on your table. It's not scrap. If you could maybe tear off a piece of an edge of your paper just for a minute. So now on a scrap piece of paper, this is called You Choose. I call it exorcising exercise. Write down your beliefs, your specific beliefs about the goals and expectations for exercise that you know are hindering you from enjoying moving your body and from sticking with it. So just take a minute and write down. You can even just use words. You can say should or hard. Just write down some things that you know get in your way of it being a positive part of your life and of you doing it. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is exorcise exercise. I want you to rip up that little piece of paper you just wrote down. Rip it up. Get rid of those beliefs and expectations that are getting in your way. Take charge. If they're not working for you, get them out of there. So let's think about this. Exercise will make me skinny. Gone. I have to do it for at least 30 minutes. No pain, no gain. I'm not athletic enough. I look fat when I exercise. I hated PE. I hate to exercise. I'll never be successful. I'm going to get rid of those. Gone. And when you do that, you create space for new beliefs and expectations that you determine that are going to fit into your life and align with who you are as a person. So what did that feel like to rip up that list? Can someone tell me what they thought about when they were doing it?
I wanted to cry.
Someone wanted to cry. What else? Nervous. Why nervous?
I have, it's just kind of.
So you're nervous that getting rid of shoulds might not help you, but have they been helping you up till now?
No.
Okay. So and that nervousness is understandable, and some people feel really liberated because they're taking charge. They're saying, okay, yeah, I was taught that from reporters and scientists and magazines, but you know what? They don't work for me. And if they don't work for you, why? Even if a doctor says this is what you're supposed to be doing, if it doesn't work for you, then it's not effective for you. And that means you have to find your own way. But what this also means, inherent in this, is that people have to take responsibility for your choices and your beliefs and your behavior. And I think this technique, that's people are talking about in healthcare. Patients don't comply. Patients need to be empowered. Patients have to take responsibility for themselves. And that is, those complaints are coming on the heels of a incredibly paternalistic medical system that's been telling people what's wrong, what they have to do to change. And when people had a different type of illness, maybe that worked. But with chronic illnesses, the key is self-management. And no one can tell you how to self-manage. So when you help people understand why they've failed and why something is a chore, and identify the specific beliefs they have in their head that they've learned to have that do not necessarily reflect absolute truth, and give them permission to get rid of things that haven't worked for them for 20 years. I mean, we're not talking about one time, right? The things that you exercise, they haven't been there for 5 days, right? How many years are we talking? Have those beliefs been in your head? How many? Forever. 20, 30, 40 years. So this is a vehicle that can help people start to take control, because what we're doing is we're saying to them, what is here is from others. And if it doesn't work for you, then you need to reject it. And then you are a clean space to determine for yourself what's going to work for you. We're not talking about perfection. We're not talking about a light switch that you're going to immediately figure out what you need to do. It's a process, and we'll talk more about that. But basically, and this is where I was, my 5-year-old son, he is loco about construction sites. And I could have cared less about construction sites. Really, my whole life, I would never have thought a moment, a nanosecond about them. But watching my son's enthusiasm for these different types of trucks, which I've learned the names of, really, it gave me a different way of thinking about behavior. And what we need, when you are buying a house, are you going to buy a house that you know is built on a weak foundation, an unstable foundation? Would you buy a house on knowingly on an unstable foundation? You would want to buy a house on a foundation that you know is stable, right? While we've been building behaviors on top of unstable foundations, our mindset toward the behavior is the foundation of behavior. And people's mindset in general has been unstable. And so that's why behaviors keep falling down. So if we want to build behaviors that stand the test of time, where do we start? The ground for the foundation, which is the purpose for a behavior, or the foundation of a house. And what happens is when you give people permission, you help them identify the beliefs and you help them give permission to let go of them, it creates a new space. So I want to take a minute and have you guys, and I'm going to walk around. I'd like to just have you guys talk about whether you've done this kind of work before with your patients, and if you haven't, how do you envision, what challenges do you envision around this process? And I'm just going to walk around and hear what people have to say. So I heard people talking about it, and some comments that people made were, well, how do we help people develop new beliefs? And it's a really great question, and we're not quite there yet. We're entering that. Another person said, there isn't time to ask these types of questions. And I know that in many environments that is a real concern, that there isn't time. And I think because patient behavior, their ability to successfully sustain behaviors, whether you're trying to prevent illness or whether you're trying to manage chronic illnesses, this is the holy grail, folks. Across the board, healthcare savings is going to come from decreased utilization and improved outcomes. That's what, and so the emphasis is becoming more on how do we promote sustainable behavior, because now this is no longer a question of, in an ideal world, we want our patients to be healthy, to, I'm drowning in healthcare costs. You, clinician, you better figure out how to get your patients healthy. So the system is currently changing. Now, the structure of the system, the financial incentives aren't necessarily aligned for doing the best health coaching or counseling yet. But with evidence-based medicine becoming more and more important, and the need to promote sustainable behavior, again, whether for healthy or ill people, that the system is going to have to change to accommodate being successful with that need. Because our hospitals are going to get penalized when people leave and come back. And the solution for not coming back is teaching people how to take better care of themselves. So there are real constraints, what I'm suggesting, around what I'm suggesting right now. I personally believe, and it takes getting in conversations with your organizations, that having people designated who are experts in counseling about behavior change, if there is a point person for diagnosis, then they shunt that person off to the professional who can help that patient learn the new mindset and skills and take more time, because the affordability of having someone like a health behavior professional do the counseling as opposed to an MD it's much more cost effective. So I think our system is going to change to accommodate that. But that is a valid concern, that what I'm suggesting to you takes time. You have a packet of, I'm looking for the handout. This document is basically, I'm giving you everything in order, kind of like a cheat sheet. And there's no way you can use this with a patient over one session. I do this over 4 sessions, 1-hour sessions. So this is a lot to fit in. But it doesn't mean you can't start. And we'll talk about that process more in a little bit. But so let's go on. So now that people and you have exorcised or excavated the beliefs and expectations that are just getting in your way, basically, leading you to the vicious cycle of failure, it's time to transform it. And what we need to do is, I think we need to stop talking about health behaviors, and we need to start talking about self-care. Because inherent in the frame of health behaviors is this medicalized frame and prescription. And we want to take it away from that. So let's start talking about self-care. And we need to change self-care from something that people think is important. Yes, I value taking care of myself. To something that is essential to our daily lives. And the reason health behavior has not been essential to our daily lives is because it has been focused on the scale and biometrics and not on how our choices make us feel. How choosing to eat kale chips instead of fried chicken, for example, what is your energy level after you make those choices? And when you get 8 hours of sleep compared to when you get 6 hours of sleep, how differently do you feel? And when you help people start to notice how they feel when they make different self-care choices, that is what makes it compelling and essential. And so the choice to eat a kale chip or to turn off the TV and get 8 hours of sleep is no longer about, I should be doing that, right? I should be getting more sleep. I feel so much better. I should be eating that kale chip. I know it's so much better for me than that fried chicken, right? That's what people say. I should do that. But instead it's, oh my gosh, I feel so much better when I do that. You better bet I'm turning off that TV, because when we convert it from a chore into a gift, it changes the choices we make. And this is not about behavior, folks. This is about hundreds, if not thousands, of choices we make every day. And if we're supposed to be making those choices because someone else is telling us that we should be doing them and doing them in ways that they think we should be doing them, we're adults, don't tell me what to do, right? So we need to change this from a medical issue to a repeat customer issue. How do we get repeat customers with self-care? How do we get people to want to keep coming back to the self-care store? It's how it makes them feel. And then it's how those experiences help us live our lives better and better, succeed and enjoy at everything we do. So if the wrong why is the beginning of the vicious cycle of failure, then what do you think the beginning of the sustainable cycle of success is? The right why. So here's an example of what I think are some right whys. Things that are personally meaningful. That could be anything. Wanting to walk your dog outside, wanting to be with your grandkids, having energy, feeling focused, feeling strong, having a lifted mood, performing in all of our essential life roles. And what do you think that does to people's feelings about the behaviors that are delivering these things? It turns it into a gift. Man, think about it. Whatever this vehicle is that is giving you all these things, I want more of that. That's a gift. And it begins to feel essential. And then, like the vicious cycle of failure, we all do the behavior. But the difference is we don't fail, we succeed. And we succeed because these whys are the gifts that keep on giving. Our whys are giving us feedback, and feedback that we have designed for ourselves, and they feel good and we're living better, and it just reinforces us doing it again and again. And you tell me that I'm not going to get 8 hours of sleep because when I don't, I feel terrible and crabby the next day? No way. I don't want to live like that. So when you teach people how their choices influence these core parts of their lives, it changes the conversation. And this is the sustainable cycle of success. And the really wonderful news, and this is something I shared with people last night, is that the National Institutes of Health is interested in funding research on these ideas. So, the kind of most scientific place in our whole country is doing research to help us better understand how we can identify what those right whys are. And I'm working with them on that. So take a minute and write down, what are your 3 right whys for yourself for physical movement? Now, if you could just turn to your neighbor and share one of your right whys. So, I heard a lot of energy. I heard better sleep, self-esteem, feeling better. So, what does it feel like to tell yourself what your right whys are? What does that feel like? Motivating. What else? Good. Reinforcing. So this is how we start to do the shift. We got rid of the stuff that doesn't work. Now there's space to start to plant the right whys. And you are the only person who can determine what those are. So now I just want to remind you that this is what, again, here we are back at Jane Brody. It's not the weight or health. I might tell you that's why I exercise, but that's not what actually gets me to make the choice every morning to get up before dawn. It's how these activities make me feel. It's about it's bridging the logic part to our emotion through the why, through the purpose of behavior. It's the foundation for the entire behavioral process. No one has taught you that because it's newer science, but lots of research shows that. So we'll do this as kind of a group brainstorm. How do you know when you have well-being? You feel what? Can I hear what are the specific experiences you have when you have a sense of well-being?
I'm less negative.
Less negative. Lightness?
In your steps, when you look at the world, colors are brighter. Amen. Patient.
Patience. What else? Restful. What experience? When you have a sense of well-being, what are the experiences you feel in your mind and body? Joy. What else? Peace. Enthusiasm. So this is where we start to turn the corner. Is we start to ask people, this is what I do in my protocol with my clients, what does well-being feel like? And of course, most people haven't answered that question before, right? But this is a really important question because this is the new direction we're going in. So just like you ask people what they believed about behavior, what they expected from behavior, we need to now get them to get more grounded in their bodies and their experiences. What does feeling well look like in your life? What do you feel when you feel well? And this is this kind of other topic that we don't really have time to go into now, but it's really important to help your patients as well as yourselves. Give yourself permission to create well-being. Permission to create well-being. And this is where I know a lot of women say, well, I feel guilty or selfish if I take time to create well-being. That's very common, and that's why permission is part of the formula. But I would suggest that the better you take care of yourself, it's this cliche oxygen mask example. And it's really cliche because everyone uses it, but it's really accurate. If you don't nurture your own energy, you do not have your full potential energy to care for your loved ones and to do the other things you need to do. So by saying, I'm selfish if I take time to take care of myself, I should be spending time with my family, I should be doing this for my friends, it's a logical argument, but it's short-sighted. Because we are physiological, energetic beings. And if we don't renew our own energy through getting enough sleep or moving our bodies, we have much less to give to the others and the other things that we care about. So there's a real, I used to think only women had an issue with this, but in fact, men have their own reasons that they don't give themselves permission. It's because they can't be, stereotypically, research on men shows that men don't want to feel weak, and that things, if they're taking care of themselves, it means somehow that they're weak. So men and women both have their gender-specific barriers to self-care. That's why everyone needs permission. And you know who are in great places to give people permission? Clinicians are. Organizations are. Organizations who want their employees to take care of themselves, they can explicitly give people permission as long as they don't do it in a chore-based medical way, because then they're not going to get what they want. They're still giving permission, but who wants that permission, right? So this notion of permission is really important. And I want to just do this really quickly. Oops. So why don't we give, let's just say ourselves, why don't we give ourselves permission to create a sense of well-being and self-care in our daily life? No time. What else?
It takes that time away from my son.
So time with family. Okay, so not important. No messages. I didn't hear the last thing you said. So it's not okay. The message, no messages and negative messages we have. What else?
Costs money.
Self-care costs money.
Don't value ourselves.
Don't value. So now the next part of this is why? What causes us not having enough time?
Too many pots on the burner.
What?
Too many pots on the burner.
Too many things. Why do we feel like we need to give our time to our families?
Because he's only going to be there so long.
So limited childhood. Why else? Do your spouses feel the same way as you do about that? It's not important. Why do we feel that self-care and well-being is not important?
We don't do it priority in our life.
We don't make it a priority. And why don't we make it a priority? But what causes it to not be a priority? We have a lot of things going on, but yeah.
The belief that we'll be fine without it.
And why do we have the belief that we'll be fine without it? Yeah.
The messaging from TV commercials is you take a pill and it will fix everything.
So we've been taught that pills are more important than taking time for self-care. So what I'm trying to get at is really that there's a lot of reasons why we and other people, oh, I feel like I lost my, can you still hear me? That we and other people don't have permission, haven't been given permission because we've been socialized to value other things. And socialized through our families of origin, and socialized through society. And so our socialization, which is another word for education, which is another word for brainwashing, has taught us that our self-care and sense of well-being is not a top priority. So we haven't been socialized to think that we should be making our self-care and sense of well-being a priority. But you see, I think that when we change the framework from health, medicine, numbers to self-care, well-being, feeling good, that makes self-care much more compelling to fit in. Because, and then we have to deal with the issues of permission. But again, if you feel better, aren't you a better wife and husband and parent and professional? I mean, don't you really do everything better? Aren't you nicer to strangers on the street when you feel better? So I think we should start talking and using different metrics. Is that here? So we need to start using different rewards. And the reward is not stepping on a scale or a blood pressure cuff. The reward is how you feel from the choices. You get 5 hours of sleep the night before because you couldn't stop looking at YouTube, right? So this goes here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. You know, those are hard things to pull us away from. Facebook and catching up with family, those are all really positive things that feed us too, right? The problem is that if getting 5 hours of sleep does not renew you sufficiently, for some people it does, then you are basically intentionally, whether you mean to be intentional or not, you are choosing to spend 3 hours doing this activity that must make you feel good, which is good, but it's going to impact the rest of your whole day the next day, and probably lead to a lower mood, higher stress, not as effective in the things you care about. So that's why we are changing the conversation. And I want to say that there's two parts to converting a chore to a gift. One is the why, which is the foundation for the behavior, but the other is the experience of making the choice. And some people will say, well, I don't feel good when I exercise, it's only afterwards. Well, then maybe don't do that kind of exercise. And some people say, well, it feels good to eat the cookie instead of the kale chips. And that's a valid, and I'm a person like Denise, I believe in using food for pleasure, and I think the reason we have such a problem with food like Denise does is because our society has taught us to have these good and bad categories, which only makes us want to eat the bad instead of having it just be a normal part of our life. Do I feel like chocolate? Not today. So these are the things that can change when we take the tension out of the shoulds. When we take the tension out of the shoulds, then we are free to say, what do I want and what feels good? And so the experience may not be of, well, gee, the eating the cookie really does feel good, but what about taking a bite of the cookie? How did that feel? Or an hour after you make the cookie choice or you make the carrot choice, how do you feel an hour later and 2 hours later? So it doesn't have to be the immediate thing, but what we want to do is teach people through our counseling to get them to start to notice how they feel from their different choices. And we want them to make the wrong choice because we want them to start to be able to compare and contrast how their choices influence how they feel and how they live their lives. So ask your patient to select ways of doing the behavior that helps them realize their new primary reasons for doing the behavior and the experiences that they deliver. And I want to just let you know, there's no time to go into this, but my model of behavior, which asks of changing the reward from a chore into a gift, teaching people, helping them learn to strive for different goals and cues and to get different kind of inherent pleasurable experiences and to teach this learning is exactly the components based on the neuroscience of reward, of liking, wanting, and learning. And I've had the privilege of speaking to Kent Barrage about my ideas to kind of say, hey, you know, do you think there's some overlap here? And, you know, yes, his work is on dissecting rats' brains. But he really felt that there was some overlap between what we're talking about, and I think that's important. So I want to quickly review some tools that will be in your handouts. These are some ways to start asking patients to start thinking in new ways. If you were given this list and said, what are the 3 things you most want or need to feel? This is a great, once you get people to exorcise things, give them a list or help them create a list. Well, I want to feel less anxious, less stressed, and joyful. And then you might say, well, what can help you feel that way? You know, sometimes people come to me and say they want to lose weight, and I talk to them and I say, well, you know, first of all, I can't help you lose weight because that's not the in to sustainable weight loss. The second thing is you're not getting enough sleep. I think that's really the foundation of your self-care. I think we need to help people create self-care hierarchies. And we've got, again, when we stop focusing on this obsession with weight and BMI, and we start focusing on what are the foundation behaviors to foster good decision making, I bet sleep's number 1. We should be having a campaign in this country to teach people how to get enough sleep, because we know when people don't get enough sleep, they eat a lot more, they're stressed out, it leads to terrible decisions. So why isn't sleep the number 1 thing we're focusing on? So let's talk about new whys and teaching people the links. So starting with, moving regularly, what do you want to get out of it? Less stress, more vitality. I heard other people saying that these are some whys they want. Well, and then what do you want out of having less stress and vitality? And this is where it gets really interesting. So you focus on the immediate, noticeable, experiential gifts. Aren't these gifts? They're not just experiences. They're gifts. And these gifts lead to the things we care most about, being a better parent and enjoying our work and feeling, as Jane Brody said, yes, happier. Linking the noticeable experiences, which would be liking in the neuroscientific model, to the goal, to making it personally meaningful. The benefits of doing it, the real ROI is this, because this is what we care most about. And Hannah learned that through her experience. So when you teach people about their choices, and again, forgive the number 30. It's just a concept. When they make a choice, it's not about the choice in the moment necessarily. It's about how they're going to feel and live for the other 23 and a half hours in the day. And you can help people notice how doing the behavior in different ways results in chore experiences and gift experiences. Help people notice that, because that will help give them tools to start choosing. And if these experiences may be what they think is ideal, but it actually doesn't get them to stick with it, then they're wasting their time, I think. If you care about sustainability, which is where the real rewards come from, we've got to stop focusing people on gold standards that do not work for them. Here's another question you can ask people. My body feels best when I move it in the following ways and places. Get them to answer these questions. In order for me to consider physical activity as a gift, I need to have the following experiences while being physically active. And I've heard people say, and I feel, walking outside. That makes physical activity a gift for me. So these are all tools you can use with your patients. And you know what? You could ask them to fill out these questions before they even come in. When I do X behavior, I notice the following areas of my life benefit. So you want to directly connect the experiences that they're having with how it's impacting what's most meaningful and cherished in their lives. So, and this is really the place to start. It's not with the behavior. It's with what people care most about. And they need to fill this in. What does well-being and living a meaningful life mean to you? And then what experiences will help you live your meaningful life? And then what behaviors will help you guide those things? We're coming at it from the exact opposite direction. So we're going to go over these pretty quickly. You have handouts for this. So the way our typical promotion system has worked is we focus on helping them schedule and fit it into their lives, right? But this is what people's lives really look like, right? So we need to teach people that this is a learning process. We need to step away from, okay, you need to exercise 3 days a week for 30 minutes because that's what the guidelines say. No, that's not how people learn. We need to turn it into a learning process and let people start where they are and be successful. And this may not work in your system, but weekly planning and then following up the next week is a really important system of learning for self-management. Help your patients respect the tornado. Your life is a tornado. You can't put a cow in there. It's going to fly right out. You can put this in there, so that's a good place to start. Start small. And teach people that everything counts. If you're going to try and eat 2 carrots a day instead of no carrots a day or no vegetables, and that's what works for you, then that is a darn good place to start. We've got to give people continuums of behavior instead of prescriptive gold standards. Frame it as gifts. I call them opportunities to move. Where can you claim opportunities to move in your daily life? Teach people to be flexible and learn how to improvise with all the stuff that comes at us. Choose them to expect things to go poorly. And then help them learn the skills to be flexible and improvise. And having people address what comes up that doesn't go well with non-judgment and self-compassion. And this is just key. This is absolutely key, and it has not been instilled into our healthcare system, but it's key for staying on track. Praise when someone came to me and said, Michele, I exercised 5 days last week for 40 minutes. She was so proud of herself. But for me, that's a huge red flag that she doesn't really get what we're talking about. And I said, I'm really sorry, Ann, I don't want to burst your bubble, but how many challenges did you dance with? And what did you do to prevent or overcome them? That's the recipe for success, not how many times you exercised last week. So I want to have some time to just have some thoughts. Can people just, we're getting close to being over, and what I'd like to do is just have some general reactions to what we're talking about doing here, and concerns and challenges. That's the experience I've had working with, I've been using this method since 1997 with people. What I would like to do, because there's a couple other things, there's orange sheets, so before I end with my final thoughts, I'd like you to take 2 or 3 minutes and fill out those orange sheets, which is an evaluation, to tell me what you got out of this training and what you think could be better. So if you could take a few minutes and do that, I'd really appreciate it. I know that inherent in this kind of training, we had almost 4 hours, but you learned a lot of new things. And you have they printed out a beautiful color teaching tool for you to use in your practice. I encourage you to share these ideas with others and talk about them. And the only thing I ask is if you ever present them formally online or in writing or in presentations, that you just reference that them as coming from this training. I'm starting to train a lot of health care clinicians and practitioners in this approach, and it's really where I want to go, because I've been doing this since '97, and it really works, and it works systematically. So I hope that you use this. Be in touch with me I haven't finished it yet, but I'm building a new Facebook page where I really just want it to be focused on a resource for practitioners and professionals who want to use these ideas and talk about what they're learning, what's challenging. So I want to say that I have a couple of free reports. One is called Why Health Promoters Should Stop Promoting Health, and the other is called 6 Secrets to Lasting Change. There's a white sheet where you can write your name and email address and write down whether you want me to send you one of these via email. I have a monthly newsletter that I'll sign you up for. And then once a month or once every 2 months, you can hear updated ideas and updated research about this. So let me know if you want me to send that to you. And I hope you will stay connected with me. And feel free to go to my website, which I guess is not even on here. Oh, it's michellesegar.com, and check things out. And if this training has impacted your thoughts, I would love for you to send me an email. And here's my email address, fitness@umich.edu. I would really appreciate you telling me the ways in which this training has influenced your thinking or how you think you're going to go about working with the patients or clients that you have. And I want to end with one idea that I think succinctly defines what this whole training is about and the primary purpose. The primary message is what sustains us, we sustain. And with that, I thank you very much.